Hello, you're watching TelecomTV's third annual summit on Open RAN and our panel discussion on the integration of Open RAN deployment models and blueprints. I'm Guy Daniels, Director of Content for TelecomTV. Open RAN comes hand in hand with a major systems integration challenge. So how can this be overcome? The development of blueprints for pre-integrated multi-vendor solutions appears to be a popular approach, but is this really practical? Well, with the help of today's guests, we're going to try and find out the best strategy. And joining me on the programme today are Francisco Martin Pignatelli, who is Head of Open RAN for Vodafone, Constantine Polychronopoulos, who is Vice President of 5G and Telco Cloud at Juniper, John Baker, SVP Business Development with Mavenir, Rimma Iontel, Chief Architect, TME Technology Strategy and Execution Office at Red Hat, and Timon Sloane, General Manager for the Open Networking Foundation. Hello everyone, very good to see you all. Thanks so much for taking part in our discussion today. Now, the first question I'd like to ask you all, given the fundamental nature of Open RAN, is integration therefore the big deal breaker for Open RAN? And Paco, as our representative CSP on the panel today, let me start by asking that of you.
Thank you very much, and I'm glad to be here today. This is certainly a very important topic. We recently published a couple of weeks back a white paper in Vodafone to actually stimulate this discussion. I think is the hot topic now, system integration. So yes, I think it's the topic that we need to be working on at the moment, and we need to make sure that we deliver a new process. We re-engineer the different phases, because we cannot end up with a situation where, imagine we have 5 or 6 suppliers in a given deployment. We have all of them trying to do the product integration themselves, right? So I think we need to work on a collaborative model. And for me, this is a point of concern today, because I'm seeing most everybody trying to build their own lab, replicating the full infrastructure, trying to sell it to all the parties. That I don't think is not going to work. We need to come up with a way of working that is at least equal, but hopefully cheaper and more efficient than what the traditional suppliers have today. They are the ones doing the product integration, so that's the benchmark.
Well, thanks, Paco. And you raise a very good point there about, if you've got a number of suppliers and they're all trying to do their own systems integration work, this is not an efficient way to move forward. Rimma, what are your thoughts on this? Do we need to sort out the whole systems integration effort? This could be a deal breaker for Open RAN.
I wanted to echo something that Paco said about using what other people have done and not duplicating efforts. The answer, whether to do it yourself or to use somebody else, obviously each service provider is going to answer it for themselves. Some have really large shops where they can do their own system integration, and they do that. But smaller companies should be able to benefit from what others are doing or what is happening in the community as well. Because if that doesn't happen, if everybody has to reinvent everything from scratch, then it's a non-starter, because Open RAN ecosystems are really complex. That was the whole point behind Open RAN, bringing in more vendors. More vendors means more integration effort. So we need to work together. We need to be able to benefit from each other's work. And obviously, as an open source company, that's how we like to work. And we would love to see service providers adapting that same model for themselves as well.
Thanks, Rimma. And we're going to come on to this whole point about who is best placed to perhaps lead out the systems integration work in a moment. But John, let me come to you on this opening question about the importance of systems integration for Open RAN.
Yeah, it is important, but I think the point I really wanted to get across is that the physical number of elements, or the architecture, if you like, is really no different to the way networks are being deployed today. You have a radio, then you've got CDU, DU elements. A lot of this is about good project management and who is going to be the project management lead, if you like, for putting these pieces together. There are some new skill sets that are required in terms of the virtualization pieces, in terms of software on compute platforms. But in reality, operators have been building networks, and I've been privileged to be on the operator side, and I've built 3 or 4 networks on a global basis. And, it really does come back to focus on project management and time management, and then, and how the suppliers dovetail into that process.
Thank you, John. Constantine, let me come across to you for some comments there.
Right. No, I agree partly with John, but when it comes to having multiple vendors, right, come together to offer optimized solutions, I think the systems integration work, however you call it, it can be in the form of blueprint or a plugfest or more formal system integration, is still very important, right? So on one hand, standards, if you really think about it, standards and automation try to simplify systems integration complexities, right? So we should be getting, different modules together, working not out of the box necessarily, but pretty close to out of the box. And automation helps a great deal. But at the end of the day, when you have best of breed from different sources, you need to make sure that A, they adhere to the standards, and B, they interoperate. So, if you take any 2 functions, whether in the world of telco or enterprise or whatever, as long as you adhere to the standards, you have a clear way of communicating, synchronizing. The data models are there, but that does not necessarily assure interoperability out of the box. So the SI is very important. Plus, it can be the neutral broker of sorts, right? That can represent the real truth to the customer, to the end customer, the service provider.
Well, Constantine, let me quickly go back to John for some comments on what you just said there.
Yeah, I think, I think there's 2 things being mixed up as well in this sort of discussion. There's the sort of the deployment system integration of the real live network. But, the other side of it is the cooperation and, going on between vendors that gets done outside of the operator's network in terms of proving the functionality and optimizing, the network element. So I think, if there's a belief that the first time these pieces come together in an operator's network is part of the discussion, then I think, we need to break these 2 points apart and ensure equipment works before it even sees the operator's network. Otherwise, we're into some real challenges.
Okay, well, thanks everyone for comments there, and you've all touched on this aspect. So let's develop it a little bit further. And Timon, let me come to you first with this one. To what extent should operators do their own Open RAN integration, or should they all simply outsource it to a trusted third party, one of their partners, one of their suppliers? Obviously, a lot depends on the individual operator, but is there an ideal approach that could be adopted?
Well, I think it depends on the operator, as you say, but it also depends on where we are in the journey. And I think a really good baseline for us to consider is the journey that ONF has taken, moving open solutions into the broadband space, which is a few years ahead of where we are with the mobile space. And so what we saw there is that some lead operators will be more involved upfront at the start and take a more proactive role. And as the market churns and as new integrators emerge with the right skill set, it requires some transition in the market. It typically requires a new class of company because the incumbents have all the right skills, but not necessarily all the right motivations. And smaller companies don't yet have the right skills. And as the market sort of shakes through that, some new integrators emerge. So in the early days, in the broadband space, we saw lead operators like Deutsche Telekom, Turk Telecom, do a fair amount on their own, and then over time, some new players really emerged and established themselves. And I think we're in exactly that same kind of position in the RAN space. And the early work that we're doing in trials is largely operator-led right now from the right class of operator, but we're seeing new players step in and start to build the skills so that they can establish new lines of business around integration. And we think that's sort of the right way to approach this problem.
Thanks, Timon. And Paco, Vodafone is one of those companies that's really pushing Open RAN, really showing its potential and leading by example. What's your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I agree with the comment. I think initially there has to be a number of operators that are leading and that are offering the cooperation, the work to other operators out there. I mean, we have over 500 operators in the world. Not everybody can afford to implement the big organizations and to do the same activity that would not be efficient. In the past, when you had to deploy your network, you would pick up the phone and you would call a traditional supplier, and they would flew a number of people, commercial and technical, to your country, and they would give you everything you needed to deploy the products in your network. But now, who do you call? From my perspective, I believe some of the big operators will be best placed initially to do that, and that's what we are preparing for in Vodafone. So we are happy to be contacted to help on the particular case, to help on Open RAN being successful.
Yeah, a lot of other operators and the rest of the industry is seeing what you're doing with a lot of interest. There's a lot of hope here. Let me therefore move on. And John, I'd like to come back across to you. I'd like to ask about what sorts of companies perhaps make the best Open RAN systems integrators, because you spoke earlier about not confusing the initial work that's required again with the actual deployment work. Is it traditional integrators that have got a lot of telecoms network knowledge, or is it hyperscalers, or is there a new breed of cloud-oriented company that techcos that could offer these services to pull everything together?
Yeah, I think again it's important that we don't confuse what is related to product performance and conformance, if you like, to specs versus physically deploying and implementing out in the field. And the majority of skill sets are actually used today in terms of building the networks we have. If you go and look at how the current vendors do it, they subcontract a lot of work in terms of like tower climb, physical installation, all that type of stuff. And that will continue. The physical work and placing of boxes, is in some respects is no change. The real difference in this is, sort of how do you mass deploy, the software containers, if you like, onto these platforms. And in that respect, it doesn't take an army of people to actually do that. Once you've got an IP connection from wherever the main data center is through to the tower, then using continuous integration, continuous deployment tools from a central location actually requires less skills. Or less skilled people, let's put it that way, to actually go do that. I think the people obviously doing it are very skilled, but in terms of how to operate those systems, how to load up the software and how to deploy it. But as an example, we're deploying now today hundreds of CUs and DUs on a daily basis onto the physical boxes that have been out installed in the field, and we're doing that with very, very few people to actually go do that work. And so that's a whole new mind shift, if you like, in terms of how to deploy these networks. Once you've got the IP connectivity and the physical boxes out there, then the rest can be done from a central location.
Thanks, John. Any other thoughts about who might be the best sorts of companies that telcos can turn to help them with their SI efforts, or is it a mix of companies? Is there no one company will do everything? It depends on the particular instance. Paco,
in some respect, John was saying, and it's true, that this is about very complex program management, which is true. But at the same time, sometimes we have found that the knowledge of the radio is very important. We saw that when dealing, for example, with self-optimizing networks. So I think that's something that will be clarified in the next 18 months or so.
Great, thanks, Paco. And John, just want to respond to something that Paco has raised there.
I totally agree with what Paco's saying on the radio side, but to that extent, the radio piece is, if you like, apart from the interface, is the same in terms of structure, performance. So, it's the same types of companies, climbing towers, optimizing the network, drive testing, etc. But to that extent, then if you've got project management companies, cloud scale integrators. There's far more choices out there to be had, and I think some of this will get self-sorting. But this is why I think you're seeing a lot of the big cloud scale, consulting companies, if you like, come into play now, because the cloud scale deployment, if you like, is probably the new challenging piece that processes will get optimized long term. But I totally agree with Paco. From a radio performance perspective, and that, in some respects, the skill sets are unique, and we'll continue to use the same set of resources we use today.
Great. Well, let's quickly go back to Paco, and then Rimma will come across to you. So, Paco.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out I think the distinction needs to be made between what John was saying. There is a first phase where probably the radio knowledge is way more important, which is where you are testing the interworking. You are making sure that all the products work together as you want. And then once that is done, then there is a second phase that is about deployment and getting the networks out there. And for that part, probably it's not so important the radio knowledge, and it's more scalability and having the right presence in different markets and all that gets more important. Then again, you have the network live. And when the network is live, you will have problems, and if you require someone helping you to fix them, that's again an area of deep radio expertise or knowledge, and then maybe you're back into the situation where that type of supplier is required.
Great, thanks for that, Paco. Well, let's hear from Rimma now, and then we'll go across to Timon. But Rimma.
Yeah, we cannot forget that Open RAN deployment is not happening in a vacuum. So when we're talking about integration, we're not just talking about integration of Open RAN components themselves. We have to remember all the other things that need to be in the network for Open RAN to be successful. We need to think about day two operations. We need to think about observability, operability, all of that as well. So when you're looking at your system integrator, it's not that first initial deployment that you're worried about. It's about your lifecycle management. It's about ability to operate your network going forward and being successful in growing that network. So your system integrator needs to have that deep domain knowledge. It can't just be one piece of it. It can't just be RAN, or it cannot be just automation, or like that limited view. Unless you have a full scope of knowledge, your system integrator would not be successful in helping you. So when you're selecting it, who you're working with, I think that's something you need to concentrate on as well.
Thank you for those comments, Rimma. And Timon, your views, please.
Yeah, I think that what we've seen is there sort of an intersection of three skills that are getting used in these kinds of deployments. It's, the classic telco skills, yes, but then there are the IT skills and maybe sort of the cloud platform. And what we've seen the best success is when some base levels, pretty significant base level telco skills exist. We've seen deployments and operators try to use companies that are really well versed in IT skills but don't really have the telco component, and honestly, that's been more of a struggle. And I think we've also seen the hyperscalers have the resources to hire and to build in and start to build up that talent, that telco talent. And in those cases, then the hyperscalers are starting to have success and an impact. But I think the common denominator here is telco skills. So we want to blend together these three capabilities, but the understanding of the telco networks and the complexity behind them and RAN is sort of an essential component to make it successful.
Great, thank you very much, Timon. Thanks, everyone. I've got a loaded question next, and Paco, I'm going to put it to you first because Open RAN is an evolving story here. So is there any point in operators embarking on Open RAN integration efforts while specifications are still ongoing, they're still not finalized yet by the O-RAN Alliance? Is it better off just to wait until we've got Open RAN sorted out and fully specified before you start embarking on Open RAN?
We cannot wait. We are deploying networks right now. So there is a little choice, and we also, as I mentioned before, we believe that some of us, some of the big operators need to, go first and lead the effort. So it's happening now. We need to be there, and I think to a very reasonable point, the right maturity is already there for us to start. Okay, maybe we don't have the full set of interfaces there yet, but it's also important to get the ball rolling and capture feedback from initial operations, and then improve the solutions out there. So I think it's a natural adoption of innovations. Someone needs to go first.
Great, thanks Paco. And John, Vodafone certainly isn't waiting, but should other operators wait?
No, and I really want to clean up this. There's some FUD in the marketplace about O-RAN specifications not being complete, and that's being used as delaying tactics. All the key interface specifications are done. In terms of first generation, even second generation specs are coming out, and this is no different to the way that 3GPP has been behaving in terms of producing specs and variants. So. Absolutely not. There's no reason to wait. And again, the one great advantage with having a software virtual platform or cloud scale platform is that you can update these virtualized containers, etc. Fairly instantaneously. So you can upgrade features and functionality into the network as and when is needed. And but no, this message that specifications are not complete is a complete misnomer. It's the same as 3GPP. O-RAN is developing new interface product specifications, if you like, things like RIC and that are still moving down the path. But they're things that can go into the network in the future, very much the same way as 3GPP is coming along with new parameters and new features. So there's absolutely no reason for people not to move forward. And at the end of the day, it's still 3GPP on an end-to-end basis that's governing the performance of these Open RAN networks.
Yeah, good point, John. And it's stage releases. There's a roadmap here. Constantine, can I bring you into the conversation at this point on this topic? Is the advice if you want to go Open RAN, then go ahead, because it will keep evolving, and we can just keep adding as and when certain elements and features are ready.
Absolutely. I fully agree with John and Paco. If you really think about it, this is the right way to do it. Standards don't work in a vacuum, right? And there is a great dynamic, a healthy dynamic between standards and implementation. One drives the other to some extent, and operators are part of the committees that define the standards. So are vendors. So I think that's the right way to do it. As a matter of fact, there is absolutely no downturn or drawback to that. And I also agree with John. It's not a fact that standards are not up to maturity. If you look at ORAN, take the RAN components, for example, DU, CU, etc. They are ready for deployment. RIC is ready for deployment. All the A2 interface has been specified. Of course, the data models and the service models are still being evolving, but I think we're ready for prime time.
Great, ready for prime time. That's just exactly what we all want to hear. Timon, I think you wanted to come in on this point as well.
Yeah, I just think that I would agree with everything that I've heard. I think everybody here is saying that it's time to move, and that software and implementation should really come in parallel with the standards itself. It's waiting for the standards to be 100% complete is really not the right approach. We've seen that fail in the past in many cases, and it's a software first world at this point in time, and it is easy to do continuous upgrades in the field. And the best way to define standards is to, in parallel, have the software advancing and to be demonstrating the capabilities, proving what's possible, and not working in a vacuum. So I would just, echo what everybody's saying here, and I think that the time to move is now.
Absolutely. Thanks, Timon. Thanks everyone for your comments there. I think we've probably got time for one more question. And at the beginning of the program, we mentioned the development of blueprints. Rimma, if I could come to you first on this one, how important is the development of blueprints for Open RAN system integration efforts? And if they are important, then whose blueprints should we be used? How many should be used? Can you give us some a feel, perhaps, of where blueprints sit in this?
It's a crucial step. We already discussed how complex Open RAN deployments are, how much how many different challenges operators are facing with the integration. So blueprints is the glue that can bring it together, if you will. They can make it easier, especially for smaller operators, for smaller system integrator shops. It's a starting point, right? It's something that you already have validated, something that you know is going to work if it's done right. And it helps you, right? Because even if you want to tweak something, you can already have a base to rely on. How many? I don't think we can answer that question. Maybe one of the other guys can, but as many as you need for each scenario of possible deployments, options for different splits, for different combinations of components at different locations. All of that needs to be taken into account and validated and tried out to find the best possible solution for a given operator, for a given use case. Because we have to keep that in mind as well. Open RAN is not meant for just one use case. It's meant for many different services, and potentially you're going to have a blueprint for each one of those as well. Who should be doing them? We should be doing them. The vendors who are providing the infrastructure for Open RAN, from the platform to all the Open RAN components, the operators who would be telling us what they're interested in to guide us to the blueprints that are relevant to their specific environments, the system integrators to prove that they know, they have the right knowledge to help the actual operators deploy. So yeah, blueprints are crucial in my opinion, and it's going to be a work of many different people, many different companies. And the validation portion of it is probably up to the operators to see if the blueprints we come up with actually apply to them.
Thank you very much, Rimma. Paco, as an operator, do you find blueprints useful? Are they useful to receive from your partners? Are they useful to contribute to and feedback into?
The real point is collaboration. So we should see the blueprint as a way to enable that collaboration. It needs to be on structure. So first point, I think we all need to agree what the right blueprint is. And I see two different levels. One is, for example, in our case, we're starting deployment in the UK. There is a set of vendors out there. You could say that's a configuration of vendors, or we call it package in our case. So the blueprint that allows to detail and to show how that integration is done is one case. But what happens when there are other operators doing the same with other set of suppliers? You could see that there is or there will be at some point a need for a coordination of blueprints generation, and we also need to find who will be dealing with that. From the discussions we are having, and also after talking to them, the Telecom Infra project can be the right organization helping us to coordinate at that level. But certainly, back to your question, I think blueprints are a good tool, and they will certainly be there.
Thank you very much, Paco. Constantine, I saw you nodding there to some of Paco's responses. What's your view of blueprints and the collaboration process?
I think Paco used the word coordination, which is key here. I don't think one size fits all here, right? So blueprints are extremely important. At the same time, we have to be very careful to consider how we approach blueprints. If you over prescribe the blueprint, it becomes very specific to one use case, right? If you approach it from an inclusive, more general, more high-level approach, I think it can serve its purpose very well. And it can be crucial to smaller vendors, technology companies that want to be part of the blueprint solution. It sets expectations, right? What do you need to have as a technology vendor? What does the customer, the service provider, labels as critical, nice to have, etc. So it can serve a great purpose as long as it's approached, the right way.
John, just time to get some comments for you on blueprints.
Yeah, I think we have to be careful not to overcomplicate the fact. Just because we call it Open RAN and we've got virtualization, in the RAN space, we've been dealing with virtualized networks for 10 plus years in the core, and distributed networks per se. And I think it's falling back onto some of the skills and practices that are used in the the IT world, and the convergence of IT and RAN, is really what's going on here. And the danger is we have a new subject, and when we come up with all these new processes and overcomplicate things. I think it's important we learn from our past experiences, if you like, and use best practice in this deployment. But I think as Paco said, it really does come back to cooperation and coopetition, as I call it. We can have equal vendors, cooperating to do this integration, but competing commercially. So, it's a challenge, but I think the industry is ready for it, and there's enough past experience out there to help guide through this.
Great. Well, so long as it all helps the operators get Open RAN deployed and into commercial deployment. Right. Thanks very much, everybody. We must leave our discussion there for today. Thank you so much for taking part today and sharing all your views. Now, if you're watching this on day one of our summit on Open RAN, then please send us your questions and we'll try and answer them in our live after show program later today. And do take part in our online poll. This is the question we are asking, along with several multiple choice answers, and you can select whichever ones you think are the most important, and we will reveal the votes during the after show. Don't forget to take a look at the other panel discussions and keynote interviews in this year's summit. For now though, thank you for watching and goodbye.